listening to the Bulldog Hour, getting you inside the Wilson football program with weekly game previews, recaps, highlights, and interviews. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffauf.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2-9 of the Bulldog Hour. We're here finishing up our second season of the rebooted show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays. Sitting next to me, my co-host, Justin Raffauf.
Yeah, it's good to be here, and we were able to get a lot of shows in this year. So
yes, definitely
that
more
was,
than double last year.
Yeah, I know, and you know we had our share of really good shows and some more positive news in this show too, and you know we'll get to all those things as we go through. But you know it's great. It means a couple things. We had so many shows. It means there was a long season, and people were still, at least to some degree, watching the show.
Yeah, for sure. And there aren't that many high school football teams that get to play in December. I think it's 24, and Wilson got to be one of them this year. And they have a lot over the last few years. The District 3 title in 2011 was played in December. Now, Wilson lost that game to Central Dauphin, who went on to win the state title. Wilson again played in December in 2012, in 2014, and now in 2016. And obviously, we've been over the numbers with Coach Dahms as head coach. When you're winning on average 12 games a year, there's a very high likelihood that you're going to be playing into December. So we're going to cover the Wilson Bulldogs football team, their District 3 game versus Cumberland Valley. And then, well, you know we have another game to cover, so obviously they won that one. Then we'll talk a little bit about their game versus Pittsburgh Central Catholic in the Pennsylvania Scholastic 6A Western Final, is the Final Four in 6A. That game we'll talk a little bit on. We don't have a lot from that game because unfortunately both Justin and I, for a variety of reasons, were unable to get to Altoona, so no pictures from us, and we actually don't even have the film from that. So we'll talk about the game a bit, and then we'll recap the season, talk about how the players performed, and just kind of put a nice bow on the 14 games that the 2016 Bulldogs team got to play. So first up, though, we get to talk about a great game, an incredibly impactful game, and one that Wilson is celebrating still and will for the foreseeable future because, Wilson football has been around a decent time. I mean, I know there are programs, especially from where you grew up and out west, we're talking about the Whippeal, programs that have literally been around for over 100 years. Now, Wilson, we're only in our starting in our 8th decade, but still a pretty significant amount of statistics for the program. But district titles, they started about 30 some years ago. Wilson's able to say they own 7 now. So how did they get there? Well, that was against the Cumberland Valley Eagles, a known opponent. We previewed this game on the last show, and Week 13, the first ever District 3 6A title game, and it was fitting that it was Wilson versus Cumberland Valley because we went over the stats the last time. Literally every year since 2008, at least one of the programs, if not both, were playing in the championship game at the highest level in District 3. And I believe it was only 9 times since the District 3 playoffs started that one of the teams wasn't playing for the title. So definitely fitting that the first 6A was Eagles versus Bulldogs.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you talk about the highest level in terms of the classifications in District 3, Cumberland Valley and Wilson are always in that grouping. And like you said, only 9 times when you go back to the start of District 3 football playoffs have neither team played for the district title. I know you mentioned, Wilson has, the long history, and we always refer to the streak, and so there's lots of success in there. When you talk about the big schools, a lot of the bigger school districts are newer, in terms of, old, smaller school districts that had merged at some point. And so, some of those teams, we talked about the anniversaries in terms of the years, and you referred to where I grew up. Yeah, well, I grew up in a small town, so that small town was a small town 100 years ago, and it's still a small town. So, like, the district is still, the same entity that it was then. Whereas most cases, like, that's not the case. You go back that far, you had, Sinking Spring and West Lawn, and, there wasn't a whole lot else in the area. And, those were their own entities, I'm sure, at that point. So, like, it's a different mindset with the bigger schools. And in those bigger schools, Wilson and Cumberland Valley have been two of the dominant forces.
And it really was a tale of two halves. And the dominant force in the first half was the Cumberland Valley Eagles. They rushed out to a 14-0 lead using that patented wing tee offense that's just, ground and pound. It's old school. They line them up and make you stop them. But if you do stop them, it's tough for them to switch gears. They're not a pass-heavy or a very pass-efficient offense. And we saw both the good and bad from them. But the same can be said for Wilson. Obviously, being down 14-0 at halftime, you're not playing your best ball in the first half. But most of that came down to not necessarily game plan. It was all about execution.
Right.
And we'll talk to Coach Dahms after the game. We'll have that interview for you in a bit, which is kind of the main thing we touch on. What was the message at halftime? Because Wilson was in a position both to stop the Eagles and also capitalize and put some points on the board. Obviously, being down 14-0 at half, that didn't happen. And Coach Dahms had a message for the team, which we'll play in a little bit. But Wilson's down 14-0 at halftime, and then they come in the second half and they score 4 straight touchdowns into the fourth quarter and never look back. Really, when Wilson tied it at 14 after their first 2 offensive possessions in the third quarter, I really felt like this is it. Like, they weren't going to give – they had all the momentum. They had figured out what they needed to do in the trenches to stop Quigley and the Eagles' offense, and also how to take advantage of the deficiencies in Cumberland Valley's defense, which, I mean, we can't ignore it. The injury to Charlie Catcher was huge. He was no longer playing in one of the deep safety positions, and that opened up the field for Wilson.
Right. And when you look at, it just seemed like, and obviously we're on this side of it, so it's kind of, maybe that's why I view it this way. But like you said, when it got to 14-14 and then we forced another stop, and you're just like, this is it.
This is going to happen.
We're going to march down the field. If we march down the field again, like, they know how this game's going. Our guys could tell how this game was going. Like, it just, there was a change in the air, and it probably was before that, because until we detect it, it's on the field. Like, the guys knew it, and like you said, all that it really took were a few of those plays that didn't go their way in the first half to go our way in the second half, and next thing you know, you get a long pass, and we come down with the catch, and we break up a pass, and like you said. I think, Wilson got the ball rolling in the second half and was going, and then Charlie Catcher went out, and that was tough because as that game was going on, it turned into more and more of a game where they were going to need him in his playmaking defensively in the secondary.
Especially offensively.
And offensively in our secondary, and it just, he was unavailable, which is unfortunate. But it kind of is what it is, and the team, capitalized on, like Wilson capitalized on their ability to make plays in the second half. Yeah, on both sides of the ball.
And he's a stud. I mean, he was all over the field on defense in that first half. He had an interception that ended one of Wilson's drives, and he's a great diversion for their offense because you have to account for him, because if you don't, he'll beat you. Yeah. And him going out in the second half, obviously a huge thing. And he's just a stud. He's coming back next year. I believe he's only a junior.
Yeah,
I think he's football class of 18. He's considered a Penn State lean. He has the offer from the Nittany Lions, although I did just see he got offered from West Virginia.
He also supposedly is really close with the tight end from Camp Hill who just committed to Penn State.
Well, there you go.
From the same class.
And obviously what happened Saturday night in Indianapolis, I'm sure, isn't a negative in Charlie Catcher's eyes, because, if you're just right here. So, yeah, final score, Wilson 28, Cumberland Valley 14.
Yeah. It was, like you said, it was a tale of two halves. Yeah, everybody kind of talked about what were you thinking at halftime? What were you thinking at halftime?
This is great.
I came down to the field.
Yeah, you want me to set this up for you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Toss this one up and
Yeah,
I'll
well,
head
I
down.
texted you. I'm like, hey, you coming down to the field? You're like, yeah, I'll be right down. So I'm waiting for you. You come down. We just look at each other, little exhale and just gather our thoughts, and we start talking about the game, And we basically what we just said now is what we said at halftime.
Right. This is what we do every game.
Oh, absolutely. This is no different.
Just kind of like start talking about what did we see in the first half.
We saw Wilson bent too much and broke, but they knew how to stop him. It's just there were times execution on the edges wasn't happening. I wouldn't say there were too many missed tackles. They were usually there. It was generally positioning that was the issue.
Right. When we got there, we made the plays. We just didn't find ourselves in the right spots.
Correct stuff on the edges, on defense, and on second for the offense, you have to finish. You can't get bogged down when you get inside the 35, because I think they got to about the 30 on all 3 possessions. That Wilson had only 3 possessions in the first half.
Yeah.
And all of them should have ended in points and didn't.
Because they got the ball and just drove it right down the field.
So we recapped all of that, and it's getting to the point where you got to get back up to the box to run the video, and you turn to me and you just say, all right, I'll see you down on the field so we can do video interviews after we win.
And you just kind of looked at me like, do you really think we're gonna win? And yeah, I did. I don't know why. Like I wasn't like 100% sure of it or anything. Don't get me wrong. Like I'd love to sit here and say I was, but I wasn't like sure of it.
See, that's one of those things that I wanted to tweet out because no one will believe us now. And it's the same thing. Like I of course thought we would win. I knew we could win. It showed in the first half.
Right.
It didn't translate to the scoreboard where it matters.
What I had seen in the first half told me that we weren't out of the game. At the same time, like you had to execute, and that part obviously is not up to me.
We hadn't proven that we could win the game, but we knew that we could, which seems to not make much sense. But if you were there, you knew Wilson wasn't out of it.
So we came down and after the game, and I was glad to tell anyone who would listen.
Yeah,
I called it.
We called it. Yep.
Apparently, so did the coaches at halftime. Cause that's pretty much what they told them.
There's no real. Coach Dahms was calm, cool, and collected. Just put it out there. Hey, execute our game plan. Fix our mistakes. We will win this game, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
So let's take a look here now at some of the pictures that I was able to capture. Obviously, Iggy Reynoso had another big night, over 200 yards rushing, and I believe he had. Did he have the final 2 touchdowns? Because Uric had the first touchdown, and the second touchdown was Fode Jalot, and then Iggy had 3 and 4. So he broke the tie and put the exclamation point on the victory. Offensive line performed so well in that second half.
Really
gave Uric time to mount the comeback, and then Iggy time to cement the win. And then, obviously, if you're watching, the picture on the right is one of many that I attempted to take of the team victorious, celebrating with the District 3 trophy, and just euphoria throughout. If you were following Wilson Bulldogs, at Wilson Bulldogs on Twitter, I recorded 5 minutes live from the field on Periscope, so you actually got to see like the last 10 seconds of the game, victory formation, and then just the celebration between the players and coaches, the handshake line, and then the huddle with Coach Dahms post-game. And I believe I cut it off right when the kids were collecting for this picture with the D3 trophy. So search Periscope at Wilson Bulldogs if you want to watch that video. But yeah, hey, what a game. Great time. Anytime you win, that's perfect. Wilson's 3rd District 3 title in the last 5 years, 4th trip in the last 6 years. So yeah, great time in West Lawn.
I believe 7th district title ties us with Wyomissing for most district titles in Berks County now. I still believe we are the only
Lancaster Lebanon team to win
in the highest level. Because obviously Manheim Central and some of those other schools at the lower classifications have had their dominant levels.
4A or 6A now.
Right. So, and like you mentioned, don't overlook, it's the first 6A.
Yep.
District 3 title.
So we'll always be at the top of those statistical lists when
you buy the
says
programs
6A,
and it lists them all. We'll be
Wilson
right there.
Bulldogs 2016. So that's nice, and that's something I believe we asked Coach Dahms as well. So before we get to some of the video highlights, Well, actually, let's jump to the video highlights before we give our player of the game.
Yeah.
Probably makes the most sense to show you what happened before we before we actually name our player of the game. So we got about 2 minutes here. Game recap courtesy of Huddle. And you'll see Bulldogs, Eagles in Hershey, end of November 2016. Second quarter, Wilson's already down 14-0. And this is the point where you're like, all right, let's get something before half. Nice pass from Jurg to Brian Wright. Set up what should have been a field goal, and it was blocked.
We really saw a lot of that in the second half of the season. Brian Wright going up and grabbing the ball over 2-3 defenders sometimes.
The way he played over the last 5-6 games was great. Now we're in the third quarter here. Wilson's down 14-0, and you see Connor Jurg, the junior quarterback, trying to make something out of nothing, scrambling for some yardage here. That resulted in the first touchdown, which he took in himself, cutting it to 14-7, favor Cumberland Valley. But the Bulldogs forced a 3-and-out, and actually should have had an interception by Wyatt Schonauer, but, can't catch them all, Wyatt. Then this incredible pass, and there I am standing cheering in the background. Fode Jalot, absolutely wonderful reception for the touchdown. Tied the game 14-14, and everyone was just in shock. Well, Wilson again forces a Cumberland Valley punt, get the ball back, and now you're going to start to see Iggy Reynoso take over and really start to pound his way around the Eagles' defense and courtesy of the offensive line. And here's just one of his many stellar runs that he just made people miss, wouldn't go down with the first tackle, and would get up to the sideline. And the Wilson would eventually punch it in courtesy of Iggy, go up 21-14, and now here's his final touchdown run, a beauty, again, just making people miss.
And then just outrunning
everyone else. So 28-14, Wilson with the lead. Cumberland Valley trying their best to mount a comeback. They're going to need to start passing, which, again, not their forte. And here we're going to see Fode Jalot jump in front of their fullback, Josiah Quigley, for the interception, which sealed the game. So a look at Huddle's top three in offense, Jurg, Reynoso, and Jalot, and their player of the game. Let's see if it matches our player of the game. Yeah, it's kind of an easy choice there when you see the statistics that he put up. But Huddle's got some of the information for you. We'll see if it jives with what we have as well. So, Wilson taking down the Eagles 28-14. And really an incredible performance in the second half. What a second half by the Bulldogs. And let's take a look at some of the stats. Wilson had the edge in first downs, 22-10, more than doubled up Cumberland Valley. Cumberland Valley dominated the first half, but did they have more than 1 or 2 first downs in the second half?
I think they
I didn't
might
look
have
at the
had 1
breakdown.
or 2.
I think they were held to like
65
65 total yards or something like that.
Because I think they got one before the first pick in the second half on that drive. And then I don't know, they might have gotten another one before the second pick that iced it towards the end.
Again, Cumberland Valley, bread and butter, rush offense. They had 110 yards, most of them coming in the first half. Wilson, 232.
Yeah.
Passing, again, not something the Eagles do well. Only 59 yards for them, whereas Wilson got 177. Grand total for each team, 409 to 169. So domination there by the Bulldogs. Time of possession also favored Wilson.
That is where you see, if you beat Cumberland Valley in the time of possession, that is a really good sign for your team because they are a long drive. I would be interested to know how much of that 21-52
came in the first half.
I would be willing to bet
at
least
more than half.
Probably like
well more than half. Yeah,
minutes of that.
Well, they took almost 8 minutes up in the first quarter, didn't they? It was like high 6, low 7s.
Yeah, I think there was under 6 minutes left when we got it after the first drive.
Yeah, after the first drive, right. And they had another drive in the first quarter that ended in the beginning of the second quarter for their second touchdown.
Yeah.
So Wilson had the ball once in the first quarter.
Right.
Twice in the second quarter.
Yeah. And one of those basically ended the half.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, so it was one of those where just complete different story in the first half and second half.
And how about this stat for you? Wilson, admirable on third down, 50%, 4 for 8. Cumberland Valley, 1 for 14.
Wow.
So Wilson defense, when they had to, got the job done. Now, some of the drives in the beginning of the game, they were picking up enough for first downs on first and second down, so they weren't forced into third down situations. But when Wilson held on those early downs, they had them right where they wanted them, and Cumberland Valley couldn't convert. Wilson also 4 for 8 on 4th downs. Cumberland Valley, they got a few, 3 of 10, so a little bit better when it really mattered, but still 4 of 24 on, high priority downs. Not going to win you too many games. Red zone, Wilson's actually only 1 of 3, as we saw struggles in the first half in that capacity. Cumberland Valley, they're 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They got them inside the 20 often, and they scored both times. They were able to do that, 2 for 2 for them there. Individual stats, Iggy Reynoso was the guy, 27 carries, 208 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Again, broke the tie and gave Wilson some insurance. Not to be outdone, junior quarterback Connor Yerg was 10 of 19 for 177 yards with a touchdown and the 1 pick. He also rushed 10 times for 29 yards and the first Wilson touchdown of the night. Fode Jallo was the star at wide receiver. He had 2 catches for 74 yards. Actually, both of them, I believe, were 37-yarders. One of them, though, was a touchdown that tied the game. Tommy O'Brien had 3 rushes for 23 yards. Justin Weller had 2 catches for 28 yards. And defensively, Leo Quigley, 8 tackles, a half of them for loss. Tommy O'Brien, 4.5 tackles, 1 of them for loss. And Fode Jallo, again, 4.5 tackles and that 1 big interception. Mason McElroy, the senior cornerback, had a tackle and also 1 interception as well as 2 pass breakups. And both those interceptions came in the 4th quarter, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes,
the Jallo one was right near the end.
I know they did because Cumberland Valley was going the same direction for both of them.
Yes. So when Cumberland Valley started to throw it, the Wilson defense took advantage.
Right.
With interceptions from McElroy and then Jallo.
And they both were kind of great, like acrobatic catches. So great defense. Like you said, when they forced them to pass, we were ready.
Yeah, so we actually alluded to Iggy Reynoso being the player of the game, but now that I recall, that's not where we went. So apologies to Iggy, although I think he's already been our player of the game 4 times this year. So it's not like he's going to cry too many tears over not being the guy again. But someone who stepped up both on offense and defense at important times, first trying to get the first touchdown and then scoring the second touchdown and then essentially icing the game in the 4th quarter, was senior wide receiver, outside linebacker Fode Jallo. He had the 2 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown, 4.5 tackles, and that 1 interception. So for his efforts in the game against Cumberland Valley, the 2016 D3 6A championship, Fode gets the nod as the Bulldog Hour's player of the game. All right, before we move on to talk about the game versus Pittsburgh Central Catholic, we're going to take a quick step aside here and let Coach Dahms talk to us a little bit about the Wilson victory over Cumberland Valley in the D3 title game. So here's our very quick interview with Coach Dahms post-game. All right, we're joined now with head coach Doug Dahms after Wilson's thrilling come-from-behind District 3 6A championship victory over the Cumberland Valley Eagles. Coach, when you went in down at halftime down 14-0, what was the message to your kids?
Number one, the message was correct the mistakes, because we made a couple mistakes that cost us offensively. We drove the ball up and down the field and made mistakes, and defensively, same thing. We were making some simple mistakes. Correct the mistakes and believe in yourself. Go out second half and play the game, and we'll be fine. So, we had to encourage them a little bit to believe, because I think they were, when you're down 14-0, we get nothing off that last drive. There's some doubt, it's natural. So basically it was more psychological than anything else.
Exactly. Were there any gameplay adjustments that you felt you needed to make, or not really, just it was more about execution?
It was all about execution. I know our offensive line, we talked about their defensive tackles were just sitting there and reading, and we said, hey, get into them and run them, all right? We just sit and wait for them, and defensively we told our corners we got to get a little bit more run support, which they did. So.
How does it feel to know that Wilson will be the first ever team to have a 6A championship under their belt in District 3?
Kind of nice.
Can't take that one away.
Nope, that's another one for us.
Well, I know you've been asking a lot of questions tonight, so I think that's all we're going to ask for you. But congratulations on the victory, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week in Altoona against Pittsburgh Central Catholic in the Western 6A final.
Thank you.
So that was our very brief interview with Coach Dahms following the Wilson victory over Cumberland Valley. Now, he had done like 6 interviews already, and we were literally the last one. So we wanted to cut him.
Give us the interview.
Yeah, we wanted to cut him a break, and we approached a few other coaches who just kind of politely said, "No, it's not their thing that they like to do. They just want to kind of live in the moment." And we talked about asking a few kids, but they were all celebrating.
All right, we didn't want to take them away from
and asked the same questions. How does it feel? They got asked by a whole ton of people. Iggy talked to a bunch of people, Fode and Urig and all those guys. They were approached by so many other newspapers and media companies that we were just kind of like, let them live in the moment. Some of them won't have the opportunity to experience it.
Yeah,
again.
The game was on 2 radio stations, a TV station. And so there were probably 1, 2, 3.
Well, the best coverage
4.
out there at Wilson Bulldogs on Twitter.
Right, there were about 4 newspapers there at minimum. So there were a lot of press getting interviews from all the guys.
A ton of photographers too.
Yeah. So
should I talk about Hershey Park and how we had to beg to get in? Essentially, no. Let's not touch on that.
It didn't matter. We weren't on the list.
Yeah, we weren't on the list. Even though they didn't ask our names, we weren't on the list.
Yeah.
Oh, brother. Thanks again to Coach Dahms and all the coaches we talked to this year during the season, preseason, and all the players we interviewed. It definitely took this second season of the Bulldog Hour to new heights. And I know that's what you, the listeners, the watchers, wanted. They wanted to see interviews and talk to them. We'll try to get better every year. More of them, better questions, more information. Hopefully in year 3 in 2017, we can take another step in the right direction. So thanks to everyone for helping us out and indulging us after games this season.
Yeah, that's a fun part for us too. We mentioned we only are ever going to do that after wins because it's enough. We're asking enough of the players and coaches for their time after because those are long days. Whether it's on a Friday, they've been at school since early in the morning and they pretty much stay there. And now it's 9:30, 10 o'clock, and we're like,
they want to get food and get home.
Can you stand in the cold and answer some questions for us?
Right, yeah.
So we appreciate that.
That's generally why we only do it after wins, because they're much more willing to talk to us. And
yeah.
I think the only win we didn't talk to anyone was Warwick, and that one to them kind of felt like a loss.
Well, yeah. You kind of read the moment, and everyone, including us, just kind of wanted to get out of there. We're thankful for the win. Let's go home.
Yeah. So, we got one more game to talk about, and like I said at the beginning of the show, there won't be a lot of time spent on it because we don't have a lot personally.
Right, we
don't have the experience. We weren't at the game for health and travel reasons. So, prior commitments and pop-up spontaneous things that happen just wouldn't allow certain people to go to the game. So there's not too much more that we can add other than some of the statistics and recaps from some of the great reporters. Like, if you're not following Mike Drago and Jeff Reinert on Twitter, I don't know, if you should be.
If you like high school football especially, you have to follow them. They're great follows, and they keep you up to date on all the important stuff and lots of cool other stuff. So.
And I mean, really, if you go on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, if you go to @Wilson Bulldogs and you just look at who I'm following on that account, you'll see the writers for Penn Live and their entities that cover the Mid-Penn, because it's interesting to know what's going on with the rest of District 3. Jeff Reinert and his fellows at Lancaster Newspaper.
They do a great job covering high school football as well.
They do an awesome job. And then all the people that write for or take pictures for EasternPAFootball.com, including our friends Bruce Badgley, Lee Vivian, and Andy Herr.
Right.
So they were at the game.
They
were at the game
to
as
meet
well.
Some pretty cool people.
Yeah, we were starting to
years.
branch out and interact with some of these people. And like we kind of mentioned in the past, we'd love to open this up maybe in the off season, get a couple shows in, and talk to some of these media members.
Yeah, it's funny because, not to get too sidetracked, but it seems like almost every game we go to now, there's somebody we know is there between the different press people and just as we get to know more people through this and through just kind of being there. It's a cool experience because then you talk about other teams, you talk about the other games going on, and it's just
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I'd be remiss to not mention Fourth Down Magazine, which is a newer upstart one. They started covering Berks this year, so Wilson got a lot more attention from them. And Lee Vivian also photographs for them. So, a lot of great follows on Twitter. Just look up who I'm following. If you want to know who the players are and what accounts are important for high school football, I'm following some of the best on there for sure. And obviously, I know we're going to miss someone, but those are some ones that you definitely want to be paying attention to. So the final game of Wilson's 2016 season, Week 14 at Mansion Park in Altoona. So about a 3-hour drive for the Bulldogs. Wilson got to play the District 7 champion, the WPIAL King, Pittsburgh Central Catholic, the defending 4A state champions. They only brought back 14 kids, so 14 out of 22 coming back from a state title team. Yeah, the expectations were sky high from the Vikings. Their first and only loss this year was in Week 1 to a prep school in D.C., and then they pretty much ran the table. Most of their games weren't close.
They had a couple where it's like close into the second quarter, and then
I think the closest was... I think they may have been tied with Pine Richland, who Wilson lost to 2 years ago in 2014.
Has Notre Dame recruited as their quarterback.
Yeah, was he a junior this year?
He's a junior this year, yeah.
Yeah, so he's back next year.
Yeah.
I think were tied entering the fourth, and then Central Catholic pulled away, and I think they won by 10. Right. I think it was 28-28 entering the fourth. I think the final was like 48-38 or something. But pretty much everyone else, they just absolutely housed. Like, no one was even close. They were winning by an average of like 40 points, which is just absurd. But when you have, was it 9, 10 D1 recruits, all 5 along the offensive line, it's tough to go into that thinking you have a chance. Like, it just is. And everyone was telling the players that. And the coaches, they understood what they were up against. And Coach Dahms, and I believe it was either Drago, it might have been Paul Roberts from WEU, said, Coach Dahms doesn't speak with hyperbole. Like, he's kind of just, he presents the facts to you. When you hear someone with his pedigree and his experience tell you it's the best football team he's ever seen on film, this was prior to the game, you listen.
Yeah. And we'll get there in a minute, but basically post-game, he basically was just like, I wasn't lying when I said all those things.
I wasn't making that up.
Earlier in the week. They are the best team that he's ever seen. I'm taking his word.
41 years as a Wilson football coach.
I didn't see them, just real quick. I did see that NA team a few years ago. I did not see them in the Wilson game. That's kind of crazy, but I saw them.
Oh yeah, you saw them against Mount Lebanon.
Week 1 in Mount Lebanon, and they were tied at halftime of that game. And then they kind of exerted their will a little bit in the second half. Didn't it was still kind of one of those couple possession games, but when I saw that game, I was like, you just knew. Like, you just see some of these teams and you just know, like, that's an incredible team. And just watching them in that game, you knew they were an incredible team. So that team ended up beating Wilson handily
45-10
in the semifinal. And that game aside, now, I know that was 4 years ago, but Coach Dahms still refers to this Pittsburgh Central Catholic team as the best team he's ever seen. He not once did he say one of the best.
He was very specific.
So
yeah, high praise for them. And when you're stocked like that, and you got that many coming back for a state title team, sky's the limit, right. And expectations.
Right,
are huge.
I think they would say that. Yeah, the expectations.
Well, they remind me not to focus on North Allegheny for whatever reason, but they remind me of that squad from 2010 through 2012. North Allegheny won the state title in 2010, and then they had a bunch coming back, and they're like, "All right, we got this in 2011." And then they overlooked Central Dauphin, who had just barely beat Wilson the prior week in the District 3 4A championship, and Central Dauphin knocked them off and went to the state final, and Central Dauphin won.
Right.
Well, then North Allegheny came back in 2012 with still a great
in reality, North
group.
Allegheny should have won 3 in a row.
Right.
They should.
It's exactly what they're thinking. So they come back in 2012 and say, "Wow, we let ourselves down last year. We got to come back with a vengeance." So when Wilson beat Harrisburg in the 2012 District 3 final, they got to go to a buzzsaw in Altoona against North Allegheny, who was on a mission to rebound from what happened a year ago against Central Dauphin, and they did it. Well, here we are 4 years later, and now Coach Dahms says Wilson faced a team that was by far better than that North Allegheny team that beat them by 35 points 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. But it's hard to dispute any of that.
Yeah,
like based on the things we've heard. So, like you said, we weren't there, so we'll kind of run down just a little in-depth recap of some of the results.
Yeah. So the state semifinal again, the Western Pennsylvania final, Week 14, played on Saturday, December 3rd against the Pittsburgh Central Catholic Vikings. Wilson fell 63-21. The Vikings raced out to, I believe, a 21-0 lead in the first quarter and eventually was up 28-0 early in the second, all courtesy of huge plays.
Yeah, I think
huge pass plays,
huge
running play, and a pick six returned the other way. And there just was no stopping them. There was very little that Wilson could do, and it didn't matter what facet, whether it was game plan, athleticism, execution. I don't know what the Bulldogs could have done to stop Pittsburgh Central Catholic.
Yeah, I think it would have taken a perfect game and Pittsburgh Central Catholic to still make enough mistakes for Wilson to kind of hang in there. And you know what? It's kind of one of those things where it just, what are you going to do? You kind of keep playing. You play hard until the end, and you just kind of finish it out. Kind of just pride there. Not necessarily the pride in losing, but the pride in not quitting and just kind of seeing it through to the end. And it's kind of what you have to play for. And the guys have nothing to hang their heads about. It was an incredible season.
Oh, absolutely.
And they just, like you said, they hit a team that is primed for a state championship in
back-to-back.
The biggest classification in one
top
of the
5 states in the nation,
in one of the better states for high school football in America.
Right. I mean,
that's what you hit.
Texas, California, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio.
And parts of California have strong teams, but as statewide, I don't know how it is. But there's just so many people.
It's like Bishop Gorman in Nevada,
right? Yeah.
IMG Academy in Florida, But yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania is easily a top 5 school, and you could probably make some arguments that they're a top 3 high school state in the United States. So when you have the best team from one of the best states, it's tough. So it'll be interesting to see how Central Catholic matched up against St. Joe's Prep. They won the East. They beat North Penn in an exciting game. It was, I believe, 35-25 was the final. North Penn had actually cut it to 28-25, and then St. Joe's Prep, I think, basically was like, here, let's let the Georgia commit take over. And DeAndre Swift kind of took it upon himself and took St. Joe's Prep to the state final, which they weren't able to do last year. They actually got upset by LaSalle, I believe,
right,
who then lost to Parkland. And Parkland played Pittsburgh Central Catholic last year. Parkland played them tough. I believe it was like 21-14 or 24-17 or something like that. But Central Catholic obviously won. And they'll be back to defend their crown this coming Saturday night, December 10th in Hershey. So Pittsburgh Central Catholic from the west against St. Joe's Prep from the east, both private schools, both representing the big cities in the state of Pennsylvania. Yeah. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Let's look at some of the stats from the game against Pittsburgh Central Catholic. First down wise, Wilson actually had more because Pittsburgh Central Catholic basically had big plays. Like they didn't need a lot of first downs. They didn't need long sustaining drives. They capitalized often from long distance. So Wilson ended up with 21 to Catholic's 18. Wilson, when they didn't turn the ball over, could move the ball. That wasn't an issue. There were some execution mishaps that resulted in big plays for the Vikings. But Wilson didn't have a tough time moving the ball through the air, I should say. They couldn't run the ball. They just couldn't. Well, I mean, we talked about the offensive line for Central Catholic being all D1 recruits, one of them going to Penn State. Well, on the defensive side of the ball, most of those guys are the same, or they throw in the guy that literally weighed 370 pounds. Mm-hmm. It's going to be tough for guys to move them when your interior linemen top out at what, 220?
I sit there and think, how does a 370-pound guy even get to the game on a bus? Like it's the logistics of that are just.
Well, when we got the the preview email from Coach Dahms and he wrote 370, he had to actually say that is not a typo. So that So Wilson couldn't run the ball. They got 31 net rushing yards. Central Catholic 317. Passing yards, Wilson almost 300, 288. Central Catholic just 192. But total yards, Wilson a respectable 319. But Central Catholic 509. Wilson actually dominated the time of possession, 28-34 to 19-18. But that was because, like I said, Pittsburgh Central Catholic just big plays, 50, 60-yard plays. And they didn't need to have the ball. Wilson was 5 of 15 on third downs, not what you want to see. Central Catholic not much better, 1 of 6, actually worse. Fourth downs though, Wilson turned the ball over on downs 4 times. They were only 1 of 5. Central Catholic 1 for 2 and got 1. In the red zone, Wilson was 1 of 2, but Central Catholic perfect, 4 of 4. So we mentioned Wilson running game not getting much going. Iggy Reynoso finished with 12 rushes for 49 yards. Connor Uhrig, he was the big offensive performer for Wilson. He was 20 of 40 for 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Brian Wright, Justin Weller, and Mason McElroy had great final games as Bulldogs. Brian Wright, 4 catches, 86 yards, and a score. Weller, 5 for 65 and a touchdown, and McElroy, 4 for 52 and a touchdown. On defense, 2 of the seniors led the way. Tommy O'Brien, 7 tackles from his safeties position, and Fode Jalot chipped in 5 from his outside linebacker position. So, again, I wasn't there at the game, so I don't have any pictures from the game to show you. I did grab one sourced from the Reading Eagle for our player of the game. And without being there and seeing it, it was tough to diagnose. You know, we read the articles and talked a little bit about it prior to the show. And we think the choice for player of the game against Pittsburgh Central Catholic is junior quarterback Connor Uhrig. Again, that photo is courtesy ReadingEagle.com. He was, again, 20 of 40, 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was asked to do a lot against a Division I factory, I think they were called, by either Drago or Roberts. Okay. And, hey, he had a good game. You know, everyone will point to the 3 interceptions, but he had 3 touchdowns and nearly 300 yards against a school that wasn't giving up a lot of points.
No, yeah. So, and they had us in passing situations. They jumped out.
They knew what was coming.
Right.
So still a great season for Uhrig, and we'll get to that very shortly here. So congratulations to Connor Uhrig being named the Bulldog Hour Player of the Game for the season-ending loss to Pittsburgh Central Catholic. All right, well, let's recap the 2016 season before signing off Season 2 of the Bulldog Hour. Once again, Wilson went 12-2 overall, perfect in the league, 7-0. They were Section 1 champs once again, the 9th straight time that has happened.
It's unbelievable.
It's insane. It's unfathomable. And to think that next year you could get to double digits in consecutive victories, something to dream about for sure, and just extend their record-setting pace that they're on. And obviously tonight we talked about them winning the first ever 6A District 3 title. It's Wilson's 7th overall and 3rd in 5 years. Now, week by week, remember we did all these games once again, but to round out, we'll talk briefly about each one. Wilson started the season hosting the Governor Mifflin Mustangs and came out on top 38-7. That kind of was a nice tone setter for the year because, well, at first you were like, well, maybe Mifflin's not as good as people thought they were going to be.
And that turned around pretty quickly.
And that changed quickly because they just happened to reel off, I believe, 10 wins in a row.
Yeah, and didn't lose again until
they
played
lost
to
Harrisburg,
state finalist Harrisburg,
who plays Saturday afternoom, I believe, for the District 5
and took it to
5A
West Allegheny.
Yeah, who is a Whippeal.
Right, whose coach the week before hit his 300th win. Yeah, you heard that right.
We'll actually talk about Coach Dahms' wins coming up.
Just to kind of put that in perspective.
Proper perspective there.
Yeah.
So Wilson, 38-7, destruction of Mifflin in season opener. Then a thrilling game at Gertzie again against Springford. Remember, former coach Chad Brubaker's team coming to town. He went for 2 in the second overtime, and Wilson stuffed him just short for the victory, 41-40. Wilson moves to 2-0. Then the first setback until the game we just talked about was against Central Dauphin in Week 3. On the road, the Rams beat the Bulldogs 24-6.
Yeah, that game was a little closer than the score indicated. It
But Central Dauphin was very good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And tough, and, you knew you had some work to do after that game.
The next week, we mentioned this game earlier tonight. Wilson went to Warwick, their second straight road game, and actually what would end up being their fourth in 5 weeks. There was the opener in Lancaster 11 League Section 1 play, and Wilson would race to a 14-0 lead. But then just before halftime, Warwick scored to cut it to 14-7. They added a field goal in the second half, and then Wilson had to hold on for dear life to claim the victory.
Knock down a Hail Mary at the end. Yeah.
But that also would prove to not be such a terrible game because Warwick was an excellent team.
Yeah, Warwick, you could argue, was maybe the third best team in the section this year. I mean, you could argue that they were the second best team in the section.
I think you would say that they were the second best team in the section.
Yeah, you're right. You probably would.
They beat Township head to head.
You're right. I had forgotten about that for the first time since in 2002
or something like that.
So they really turned around. Their coach actually won Section 1 Coach of the Year.
Is it Bob Locker?
I forget, but
is that something like that?
It is something along those lines.
Coach Dahms had run the last three.
Right, he had won the last three. And, when you run it like they have, that's kind of, a choice that's always there. However, Coach Dahms aside, obviously he did a fantastic job this year. But the Warwick coach really has stepped up and hopefully has them headed in the right direction. It seems like he does. They had a fine season at Warwick.
Then the winning streak continued the next week back at home against McCaskey, 55-0. That was really when we started to see Wilson kind of exert their dominance over opponents they should be taking down. Was they beat McCaskey 55-0. They went on the road back-to-back weeks to beat Penn Manor 42-13, and then Lebanon 68-19, where the Bulldogs set a new program record for points scored in a game. Then they came home for the big one, the one everyone was circling from the start of the year, against Manheim Township at home, and Wilson stormed back in the second half to win that one 17-10. Wilson was actually down at halftime 3-0 and was able to score. 17-10 was the final, and Connor Urig took in the quarterback keeper near the end of the game. I think there was like 25 seconds remaining to break a 10-10 tie. Unfortunately for him, he would get injured on that play and would miss the next few games. But we got solid play from Grayson Klein and the team as a whole as they would take down Hempfield 38-7, Conestoga Valley 42-21, and then the District 3 6A playoffs began, and Wilson was the number 2 seed. They got to host 2 games should they keep winning until the final in Hershey. The first game was no contest, 55-23. Central York scored most of those points when it didn't matter, and Iggy Reynoso was the star, nearly 300 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns.
In the first half.
Then Wilson got their revenge game in the second round of the District 3 playoffs, welcoming in Central Dauphin East Panthers once again. Second year in a row, actually third year in a row, they would meet in the playoffs. And Wilson was able to come out on top after falling in 2015 in a shocker in overtime. Wilson looked great, especially near the end of the first half. They went up 17-0. Gave up some points in the second half, but kept scoring offensively. We saw a huge game from Brian Wright, and Wilson won that one 38-21 to advance to Hershey, back to the District 3 final to play Cumberland Valley, which we talked about tonight. They won that 28-14, and then went to Altoona last week in the Western Pennsylvania final and fell to Pittsburgh Central Catholic. So a great season, 12-2. And at times, I know there were doubters entering the season. I was not one of those. I knew that this team was solid, had a lot coming back. If a few pieces clicked, I expected. I don't know if I want to say I expected. I always expect to get to the district title game. I guess that's the way I put it. Can you get to the district title game? And that's what I expected from this group. And they did it. Yeah. And sometimes they look even better than I thought they could be. So props to them, props to the coaches for getting them in the right positions and knowing what to do and when. 12-2, wonderful, wonderful season for the seniors on the 2016 team. 3-year run, 2 district titles, 3 league titles, and I think they had a record of, was it 36? No, 36-5. The 3-year group. So they got to play in 41 games. There's only 10 guaranteed games a season. They played an additional season because of how deep they went in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's unreal.
And if we point out there were a couple players that came up as freshmen, Alex Twyford and Fode Jallo, they got to play in another season on top of that. They actually went 48-6 and won 4 league titles with their 2 district titles.
So they played 14 extra games over their 4-year career. That's unbelievable.
They played in 54 games when you're only guaranteed 40. So they essentially played almost 5.5 seasons in 4 years.
And depending on where you're in the state, maybe 9.
Right, yeah. Out in Western PA and maybe parts of District 1 might only have 9 weeks. I'm not, however, the classifications got this year. So what a great year for the 2016 team and for the seniors in the class of 17. Great 3 or 4 year run. All right, individual statistics for the year. Some ones that'll be in the record books for sure. Rushing, Iggy Reynoso, 219 for 1,662 yards and 24 touchdowns. And I know you've mentioned that he's coming up on the all-time, I believe, Burke's career rushing list.
He's less than what he got this year. He's less than that away from the all-time. I think he's right
12?
11. Yeah, it's maybe upper 11s or low 12s away from the record. And I honestly don't know the record, but it's one that's been there for a little bit for Berks County. So it'll be interesting. You know, you hate to look ahead, and you know there's a lot to do before then. But you know, he showed the signs that he's certainly capable of getting those kinds of numbers.
Dual threat junior quarterback Connor Uhrig also rushed 105 times for 320 yards and 3 touchdowns. The last of which happened was the first touchdown in the District 3 championship game.
So you return your 2 leading rushers. I know we haven't gotten to
we'll
that.
Get to that. Yeah, you're jumping the gun here. Passing, again, Connor Uhrig, 142 of 234, 60.7% completion percentage, just over 2,000 yards, 2,050 to be exact, 21 touchdowns versus 8 interceptions for a high school passer rating of 157.05. So pretty good first year as a starter for Mr. Uhrig. And again, he's back next year. So is battery mate Grayson Klein, 38 of 67 for 444 yards, 6 touchdowns versus 4 interceptions, completed 56.7% of his passes, and he had a rating of 129.99.
Yeah, so that was a big benefit for Wilson this year, was having the 2 guys. I know that doesn't necessarily sound, you know, when people watch the higher levels of football, they don't talk about that 2 quarterback system. Yeah. They seem to have the right stuff at the right time this year for Wilson. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see.
2 more than capable quarterbacks with different talents. It serves different purposes.
Yeah.
And hopefully both of them back next year ready to go. And it'll be exciting to see what the 2 can do as seniors next year. Receiving, top 5, Brian Wright had 669 yards on 29 catches and 6 touchdowns. He really came on at the end of the year, as you pointed out. Steady force through the whole year was Justin Weller, 43 catches for 533 yards and 8 touchdowns. He had the most touchdowns by a receiver. Alex Twyfer, the senior tight end, 4-year player, 32 catches for 334 yards and 5 touchdowns. Fode Jallo, 17 catches, 308 yards and 3 scores. And Mason McElroy, 22 for 233 and 2 touchdowns receiving from him. Now, he also contributed another facet, and that was on special teams and at defense. Well, Mason had 4 return touchdowns, 3 on punts, and 1 on a kickoff. Not to be outdone, his wide receiver teammate, Justin Weller, returned a kickoff for a touchdown and also a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Brian Wright returned an interception for a touchdown. And not to be outdone, we got to mention our boy Nick Borelli, who points out any time that we mess anything up on this show. We got you. He was 6 for 10 on field goals along with 37, and he nailed 61 of 64 extra points.
I sure hope you had those right, because if not,
right.
Sure
if I don't have those right,
it.
he will let me know. So Borelli, let me know.
Request a special episode of corrections. No, he did a fantastic job this year, and that was the key for the team. You know, from the Springford game where there's extra points, really mattered.
And he kicked the field goal with seconds to play to tie
big
it.
Kicks in, you know, the Manheim Township game and some. So like,
Well, the best part of the Township game is that was after a miss right before halftime.
Right.
He could have easily just packed it in and gotten frustrated, and he came back and nailed one to tie the game at 3, which proved to be the difference. When you win 17-10, you know that field goal was very important.
Yeah. So he had a great year.
On defense, Leading tackler was Leo Quigley, senior, 67.5 tackles, 9.5 of them were for loss, and of those 9.5, 2.5 for sacks. He had 2 fumble recoveries and also forced a fumble. Linebacker teammate and senior Fode Jello, 64 tackles, 13.5 for loss, 3 of them sacks. He had the interception in the championship game, a fumble recovery, and also 1 forced fumble. And then Tommy O'Brien, 58 tackles, 3.5 for loss, 1 interception, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 forced fumble. Now, none of those guys actually led the team in sacks. That was actually reserve and rotation defensive end Eddie Ortiz. He had 5.5, and it seemed at times he was unblockable.
Yeah, especially, again, like in the second half of the season, it seemed like he kind of found his technique there.
And the role that he needed to perform.
He would line up so wide and just offensive tackles could not get back fast
they
enough
couldn't
to
figure out
pick him up.
And I mean, and he caused a lot more havoc than just the 5.5 sacks he's credited with.
Well, and he was close to some blocked punts. Like, he was flying in there. So, yeah, he became a force off the edge.
And we mentioned Brian Wright had an interception return for a touchdown. He actually led the team on interceptions for the season with 4.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
So that's the end of the 2016 season. We're going to take a very brief look at 2017 now, and Justin spoiled it a little bit in pointing out that
I did. I got to help myself.
The big offensive playmakers are back for the Bulldogs next year. Both quarterback Connor Urig and Grayson Klein, as well as running back Iggy Reynoso. And then if you look at pure running backs, their second leading rusher outside of Urig, Abdul McFoy, is only a sophomore next year. So Wilson's got a lot back in some positions, that generally, if you have those guys coming back, good things happen. Obviously, we're smarter to know that you got to have the linemen too. And on the offensive line, guaranteed 2 starters back in Wyatt Schonauer returns, as well as Chris Price. Now, we'll saying goodbye to Isaiah Regal, who was just won all 3 lineman awards from the LL. Yeah. Franz Borden and Jake Morris. So 3 positions up for grabs there. There's a few guys that rotated in that will be back next year that will have to step up
due to injuries and
we saw Hunter Nash, a junior this year, will be a senior next year. Nate Keller, who is a freshman, filled in for Franz when he had the ankle injury. We expect to see him in the rotation. And then you're really looking for another tackle who's going to play with Wyatt on the edge, a very important spot. So it's good that the quarterback and running back are back. No receivers, though, with significant time returning.
Right, and that's tough because you saw how important that was and how widespread that was. So it's not like you're replacing one guy. You're replacing a number of key contributors there.
Now, due to the lingering ankle issue that Alex Twyford had throughout much of the year, he missed a significant amount of time, actually a few games, definitely some series in each, in which sophomore tight end Nick Johnson got to play. And he obviously will be the leader at that position and expect to contribute a lot in 2017 after already doing a lot in 2016. And his name's going to come up again here shortly. Defensive line, actually have a decent amount back. Schonauer back at defensive tackle.
Really came on strong in the second half this year. I mean, he had a great season, but like in the second half of the year, you
just see some guys really moving.
If they didn't focus on a blocking scheme specifically for him, he started to kind of make some big plays in there. At D-tackle, especially where take up blocks, and that's kind of the role. And he was falling more and more into a key role there and was really kind of taking it on in a great way.
Chris Price will also be back at defensive end for the Bulldogs. He's another guy that took advantage of Alex Twyford being banged up a little bit. He got to play more on defense than I think originally expected, and he really owned it. He was a huge snub by the Lancaster Lebanon League All-Star selections. He wasn't even part of the honorable mention, which is absurd. That was there are plenty of Wilson players that get snubbed every year we talk about, and it sounds absurd because Wilson had 9 first-team guys or something, off the charts like that, but for someone like Chris Price not to be on it as either an offense or defensive lineman, even if it's just an honorable mention, that was a huge oversight. So hopefully he's a chip on his shoulder as a senior next year as a 2-way starter. At linebacker, we saw Trevor Hatley jump into the lineup mid-season. He's back, as is the Nick Johnson, who we mentioned about at tight end. He'll be back to play inside linebacker. So entering the season, you essentially have 2 inside linebackers back that played a significant amount of time. Hatley became a starter. I don't know if you wouldn't call Johnson a starter, because usually that was Leo Quigley and Hatley were the two that were going for the second half of the season. But Johnson spent a lot of time playing that middle linebacker, that inside linebacker spot. So Hatley and Johnson will be back next year. Defensively, you've got two corners that saw a good amount of time. Now you're losing Weller and McElroy at corner, and Schaber and O'Brien at safety. But Isaiah Gilmore, only be a junior next year, played down the stretch until he got hurt in the Cumberland Valley game.
Yeah, and to tell you, like, what, the coaches thought of his play down the stretch, between game plan and other things, I'm sure there's some other factors, but in the Conestoga Valley game, they put him out there on Charlie Catcher.
The Cumberland Valley game.
Yeah, sorry, not Conestoga. The other season.
He actually, I think the Conestoga Valley game might have been his first start.
He did, and they put him out on an island on that game, and he played well. And in the Cumberland Valley game, they put him out there on Charlie Catcher.
Positioning wasn't an issue.
Right, one-on-one. He had like take care of it. So and he was having an okay game. There was Charlie Catcher's going to make some plays, but he was doing all right. He had that injury in the later in the game, but hopefully he I'm sure he'll be able to bounce back from that and have a great junior season next year.
Right. And Trevor Tenga, he saw a lot of time in the defensive backfield and sub packages. He'll be back as a senior in 2017. So a decent amount back. Wilson is a team built on seniors that only get to play for 1 year. That you talk about every year, there's always guys that step up as seniors. If they can find a few at the key positions, primarily offensive line and wide receiver, and one or two more guys in the defensive backfield, which they already were grooming John Fox's younger brother, Joey. We saw him start against Conestoga Valley. He was a sophomore this year, teammate of Isaiah Gilmore. Very possible that he could start at safety next year as an underclassman. So there's options there. A lot of time left to develop, obviously, because it's still December and the 2016 season isn't even completely over in Pennsylvania.
Right, yeah. So there's a lot of time, but we know it won't be long till they're at work on filling in those spots.
Oh, for sure. You're not playing a winter sport, plyometrics and stuff a couple days a week. That's ready for you in January. All right, so some milestones before we go. Coach Dahms earned his 129th win as head coach in the victory over Cumberland Valley, and that actually, believe it or not, ties him with Coach Gerald Slemmer for second most in program history. So his next win will put him all alone in second place behind the legendary John Gursky, who has 151. So really, Coach Dahms is only 2 great years, maybe 3 away from surpassing John Gursky on the Wilson victory list.
That's incredible. Not to take, it's incredible to think how many wins Coach Gursky had, especially the way the schedules were set up. They didn't have a chance at 14 games, like stuff like that. But it's incredible. If you look at the time frame that Coach Dahms has done it over,
that's incredible. Even more absurd.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we broke that. We break those down usually in the preseason, and I'm sure we will next preseason.
Absolutely.
So it's incredible his rate at which they are accumulating wins.
Some of the Wilson assistants are approaching some milestones, and depending on how 2017 goes, a few of them could reach them. We expect to see inside linebacker coach Matt Bender reach 200. He's currently sitting at 198. Offensive coordinator and quarterback coach Jeremy Palm is chasing 150. He's at 146. And a good year from the Bulldogs, Brandon Naples, the defensive back coach, will get to 125. He's at 118. So a couple milestones here, and then I know in 2018 we'll be talking about probably Ernie Wolber approaching 200 as well.
Wow.
So a lot of experience on that Wilson staff for sure. All right, well, the second season, the Bulldog Hour may be over, but you still want to make sure you follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Look for the Bulldog Hour and the parent company of the show, JMNJR Radio. Follow us on Twitter at Bulldog Hour, at JMNJR_radio, at Mr_Raffauf, and at Coach Joe Mays. And on Instagram, we're at Bulldog Hour as well. Thank you once again to our sponsors, Mays Sandwich Shop, as well as our anonymous donors, and the ones that have given us in-kind donations, such as Andy Herr, who we mentioned earlier. He's getting geared up now for basketball season, so you want to check his stuff out at llhoops.com. And if you're interested in supporting the show, go to bulldoghour.com to find out how you can become a sponsor. Well, anything left to say about the 2016 season?
No, it was a fun year. It was a great time. Knowing some of the kids on the team, I know better than I have in years past. Just through getting to know them in various ways. Through class or other things like that. So it's been fun watching these guys have success on the field for the last few years, and they finished it out with a great season, and it'll be fun to see some of the underclassmen start to fill in those roles. We think back to when guys like when Tommy O'Brien started seeing time, and
in 2014,
even Mason last year when he was a dynamic returner last year, just some of those things, and then they kind of come into play those bigger roles as they become upperclassmen. It's a lot of fun, and we talk about that every year. It'll be interesting to see some of these younger guys take those roles on, starting in a couple of weeks, actually, probably, but throughout the spring and summer especially.
Yeah, I started coaching at Wilson Central in 2009, so the 2012 season was the first that any kids that I coached were seniors and were leading a team. And every year since then, it's just been incredible seeing all the kids that I had now at West Middle School, especially this class. You mentioned Tommy O'Brien and Elliot Bob and Mason McElroy, but as the line coach, Isaiah Regal and Franz Borden were two of my guys, and they asked me on one of our last practices who my favorite lineman was. And of course I had I couldn't give them an actual answer. No one has favorites.
John Runyon. He's my favorite lineman.
But, I gave them a joke answer. But, I mean, truly, their group, the class, this class of 17 graduating class, the football seniors in 2016 were a joy to coach in middle school. They were a ton of fun to be around. And I'm very happy that they're leaving as one of the best classes that Wilson's had. 2 district titles, 3 league titles, and 36 wins.
Yeah,
what a group.
I was really happy. I know, I didn't know some of the kids on the team quite as long as you have, but I've known them a couple of years, and I know, just some of the things that have happened throughout their careers. They wanted it really bad this year, to get as far as they could,
right.
Knowing that, they understand the reality of it. But, that district title game, it means a lot to them, and that's something they're going to have forever. And come banquet time, I know that's something that they're going to be able to kind of cherish that and the league wins and all of those things. So they have plenty of accomplishments and had a great season.
Yeah, Brian Wright, J.P. Schaber, Nick Sapone, Vinny Martinez, Chad Lewis. Am I forgetting anyone? Oh, Nick Borelli, who we talked a lot about. All those guys, they were on the 2012 Wilson West team, and what a class, what a great group of guys, and it was fun to watch them over the last few years, and really, really end up on top. You win the District 3 title in 6A, you're one of the best, and they proved a lot of people wrong. So very happy for them, and obviously all the brethren from Southern and anyone that's moved into the district. Yeah, you put on that helmet, you're part of the red and white. I got nothing but love for you. So. Well, I think that's it. Thanks again for making the second season of the Bulldog Hour a successful one. And Justin and I will be back sometime in 2017 to kick off the third season. All right, so we hope you enjoyed episode 9 of the Bulldog Hour second season and the season finale of the show. For Justin Raffauf and the Wilson football program, I'm Joe Mays. And remember, go Bulldogs.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a feature program on jmnjrradio.com.